Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, looking sharp there. A little burgundy and gold for
Yeah, a little
a gray hoodie. Or
little something.
about time you represent.
I like being cozy on the pod, man. What can I say? I put on my Sunday's best today for our podcast. How's it going, Pop? How you doing?
Appreciate the extra effort on the hair and makeup. But
Important.
doing good. Yeah, ready to chop it up a little bit. Appreciate all the love out there. Views have been great. We've been really trending high and positive. So thanks. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends.
100%. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We've been enjoying all the banter, all the good chats about this team, and there's a lot of fun stuff going on, man. So let's get into it. So, not a ton of news, but just some more depth signings for the Commanders. Obviously, the one that's going to ring out the loudest is that Michael Gallup signing. For me, this is shades of remember Martavius Bryant last season when we signed him, and everybody's like, he's going to make the team and be the big body. Exactly, yeah. The guy hasn't been productive in a while, but it's a good high upside, low floor signing. He signed a vet minimum. And then you've got Foster Sorrell, right tackle from the Chargers, 6'6", 322. Obviously, the plan at offensive line is very clear. They want to bring in a lot of big bodies, a lot of depth guys to compete, to fill out the back end of that roster. I think the starting five with Tunzel now is pretty much locked in, barring a really great right tackle falls to us later on in the first round. But yeah, and then the other headline is we restructured Deebo Samuel's contract. So he's going to get all that $17 million this year guaranteed. We're going to take the full cap hit this year while we have the extra cap space. There's another $3 million added in incentives for him. And basically what that does is that makes it so that next year is a totally free year. So there's no cap hit at all next year if we were to get rid of Deebo, anything like that. The way his deal was previously scheduled was there was a bit of a cap hit for next year, even though there was no guaranteed money on it. So this just frees that up.
He's only got a 1 year deal, right?
Yeah. But the way those deals work sometimes, it was only a 1 year deal either way. But the way those deals work sometimes is they spread out the dead money. So like it was a 1 year deal, but the dead money would have actually hit in 2026.
So I think a couple comments, right? So Gallup, I agree with you. I mean, there's nothing to lose there. I mean, obviously I hated going up against him when he's with the Cowboys. He did some damage. Yeah. And he's got some, he's had some good seasons. He's a speed guy. I guess there's two big questions there. Is his heart in it after sitting out a year, which of course he says it is? And where is he health-wise, right? He came off an injury. Does he still have the type of speed that he had at one time? So all that'll come out in camp. We'll figure it out. Getting another big body on the offensive line, you always love to see that. I think the Deebo restructure is so smart.
Yeah.
I think it's so smart because you kept it at 1 year. He seems, we got a Deebo press conference this week, so he seems super stoked about it. He's
saying all the right things.
He's saying all the right things, but he seems stoked about the contract. And you would have think, one of the concerns we had is, will he want a multi-year deal, which I think is something they'll probably have to do for Tunsil, the other big signing. But no, it's 1 year. So, all you're risking is that fifth round pick because who cares about the money? You got to spend the money in the salary cap anyway, right? So that the money is irrelevant to me. I don't know why people get wrapped out around whether he's worth $20 million or not. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right. It's a low risk situation. You got a highly motivated player saying all the right things, saying pretty much, I'm a hybrid. I don't mind. I'll play running back, receiver, whatever they need me to do. So I think it's a very, very smart move by AP. But what else would you expect?
Of course, yeah. I mean, he's shown that that's his thing. And for the people that saying it's not worth it, I mean, look, $17 million is not a ton of money for a receiver nowadays. It's just not. I mean, if Deebo were to hit the open market, I think his AAV would probably be around 25, 26 million at least. I mean, you've got T. Higgins signing to, I think T's getting like 30 a year loosely. Jamar Chase is getting 40 plus a year, and those numbers only go up as guys continue to hit the open market. So I don't think $17 million for Debo is a ton of money. I don't think that.
And even if he, I think the thing is that one thing we got to realize is that, if we just use the Eagles, our favorite example as an example, right? They got a heck of a head start. They've been putting a roster together and with consistency in the front office for years and years and years and years. Catching them in 1 year or 2 years in terms of just roster talent, right? Now, there are other ways we can catch them, but in terms of just roster talent, it's not something you can do overnight. But the Commanders have raised the bar on what's expected from this team, right? So 2025, anything less than the 12 wins NFC Championship run is going to be a disappointment. Look, bottom line, it just will be. And yeah, they could get 11 wins and get knocked off in the second round. You're going to still say it's a good year. It could look different, but they've raised the bar and they've got to make moves like this and the Tunsil move to try to close gaps, as quickly as they can while they continue to build. And we'll get into it. We've got a pretty fun segment here coming up next, so we'll break some of this down. You can always go back. Yeah. Next week, we did a full roster breakdown, so we're not going to repeat that this week. But if you go back to last week's pod, you want to know everything about every player that we've signed, you'll find it there.
So I think you set it up well, Pop, when you talked about the expectations for 2025. With our first question here, we're doing 5 questions on the Commanders for 2025 for this week's segment. Kind of a little more of an open-ended segment for us to discuss some things that have been on our mind and been circling around topic-wise. But number one, what should we expect from Jaden Daniels in year 2? Do you think the league catches up, or will he climb even higher? Do you want to kick this question off, Pop? You want me to start?
You start.
All right.
Go ahead. I know there was a little Twitter activity on this question from the boys. So
there's two sides to this, right? So the bottom line is the national media is there. The national media is not there to be informative or objective anymore. It's just not. It's the reality of it. It's not the product. They're trying to get you to watch and to sit and either agree or disagree. That's the point. The point is to be, when we're talking about sports national media, we're talking about the big 4-letter network, all that stuff. The point is to be inflammatory, make arguments. And there are some great individual analysts who break stuff down, of course, but the overarching idea is what's the storyline, what's the sell that we can get people to stay and watch the episode and then discuss about the episode and make a clip about on social media later. So what the big sell was last year was, oh my God, this Daniels kid looks like a 10-year vet right out of the box and has an unbelievable set of physical tools and talents like maybe we haven't seen before in the NFL. What the story next year will be, regardless of what he produces on the field, is it as good as it was last year? The national media is waiting because that's the big story. They did the same thing with CJ Stroud this year, which if you look at the numbers, did not have that big of a drop-off, reached the division, made it just as far in the playoffs as he did last year with significantly less talent on that offensive line. So it's not – I mean, they were 9-8 and they backed their way into the playoffs the first year. They won a playoff game. Last year, they were 10-7 with injuries all over the board, and they won their first playoff game. So how do we call that a sophomore slump for CJ Stroud? But they did. So that's coming for Jaden Daniels. There will be people who are going to wake up every morning, put on their suit with their cup of coffee, and pound the table in LA or New York, whatever studio they're at, and yell about how Jaden Daniels is having a sophomore slump. I don't care about that, frankly, because my opinion, what we saw from Jaden, both in terms of his physical tools and most importantly, the mental intangibles, proves we have a significant starter regardless of whether he has another 4,300-yard season or if he has a more modest 3,800-yard season.
What do you expect from him in 2025? What's your early tingle?
I expect
talking MVP caliber season?
I think he had an MVP caliber season last year. So
but do you expect it to be better?
I expect him to pick up exactly where he left off. And the bottom line is it doesn't have to be better because he carried Jeremy McNichols to NFC Championship game. He carried a roster with holes up and down to an NFC Championship game. He performed at a Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl winning level. last year, MVP
I
level.
agree.
The
I
rest of the
agree.
team around him did not allow him to ascend past that. So I think as long as he picks up where he left off, he can do what he did last year for the next 10 years, and he'll be a Hall of Famer and he'll have a jacket and
No, and I
rings.
think that's where the critics of Jaden and this team in general, because people want to take shots at the team because obviously they're rooting for their team and they want to find cracks. But to me, that's an indicator that you're a little nervous, right? You're a little nervous
A lot of
because the
nerves.
fact that he was able to perform at that level with such a weak roster, right? You want to take and you want to hammer our roster and talk about how weak it is. That's fine. But you can't say that and take and say that Jaden Daniels is a 1 year wonder. Both two don't add up.
Don't work together.
And I think that, and I also think that, credit is due to a Bobby Wagner, a Zach Ertz, the players that we had on the team. Of course, a Terry McLaurin that finally had a quarterback that could get him the ball. The O line wasn't great, but I think for the pieces that we put in there, they performed at a pretty good level. Average, let's call it, but that's much better than they were the year before. But I think the thing is, the reason to be optimistic about Jaden Daniels is he's not a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He can play from the pocket. He can throw the ball about as good as anyone in terms of just accuracy and just putting things from a deep perspective. People said he couldn't throw over the middle. He proved that wrong. And then he can just kill you with his legs. And I think he's been really smart for the most part about not taking those massive hits, which everybody was worried about. And I think hopefully with some of the additions we've made with the roster and maybe might continue to make, which we'll get into in a little bit, we could take some of that pressure off him. Maybe he doesn't run the ball quite as much as he did last year. We can take a bit of pressure off of him. So I expect big things for Jaden Daniels. I think we're going to just continue to raise the wow factor, and I expect big things for this team. So I don't buy the league is going to catch up to him. And I thought you had a great point. The league had 16, 17 weeks to catch up to him, and look at his performances down the stretch.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
he wasn't the
played.
reason the Eagles beat us the way they did. It's the fact that we
No.
couldn't hang on to the football was the reason, right?
He played better. He played better against Vic Fangio, who saw him 3 times that year. He played better against him in the third time that Vic Fangio saw him than Pat Mahomes played against him in the Super Bowl. That's a fact. He played. I know Jalen Hurts didn't play in Week 16. He hung 5 touchdowns on Vic Fangio's defense after he had
Hurts doesn't play
16 weeks.
defense.
After he had 16 weeks of tape on him. And he had maybe his best game of the year, drove down the field, scored a touchdown. I agree. I think maybe we don't see as much legs, but at the same point, it wasn't a ton of the designed runs for Jaden Daniels come on 3rd and 3, 4th and 2, those 4th down RPO plays, and they're quick get outside. It's not a lot of wear and tear quarterback power style running. They don't do a ton of that. Most of his runs came off of scrambles last year. And he's incredibly efficient at it. So I don't see any reason to slow that down, but I don't see any way that I think Jaden Daniels will perform at the same level he performed at last year. And I think with putting Laramie Tunsil on his blind side and Deebo Samuel in the slot and hopefully Omari and Hampton in the backfield, I think with those 3 additions, it's going to look like Jaden Daniels elevates. But in reality, he's just going to be doing what he's doing, but he's putting the ball in the hands of guys that can actually catch it, won't fumble it, and are going to bolt downfield and score a touchdown.
Well, he gets his coaching staff back and his offensive coordinator. He gets his, mentor and whisperer back and Bobby Wagner, best friend on the team. He gets Zach Ertz back. So I think they've done a great job of retaining those pieces. Now, eventually, those guys are going to have to move on into retirement, and Kingsbury will probably get another job. But the fact that you can maintain that continuity, continue to have him grow with those same pieces in year 2 is so smart. It's so smart.
Yep. And we've seen guys, look, every year, Josh Allen comes in and out and plays better than he played the year before, and he doesn't win a Super Bowl. I hope he gets one. I hope it's not at our expense. I hope he gets one at some point. But every year, he plays better than he did the year before, and it's not enough.
It's a team sport.
And then on the flip, Brock Purdy comes in, just kind of does the job, has a great team around him, goes to the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts Has a great year last year. Not as good as his year in 2021, but he finishes this year with a Super Bowl, right? Or maybe it was 2022, the year that he lit everybody up. Not as good. Took a step back from there. Any Eagles fan would agree, but he won a Super Bowl. Maybe not any Eagle. The Eagles fans that don't agree will find us in the comments and on Twitter after that statement. But he wins a Super Bowl. You don't want to put your quarterback in a position where he has to keep putting the Superman cape on every year. It's not a sustainable formula to win in the NFL. It's not.
But you got a guy that can do it when he needs to.
Exactly.
And that's what makes his team different.
Exactly.
That's what makes his team different.
And so moving on to number 2, I think it's a great tie-in here is the criticism of AP's moves this offseason fair? There were a lot of one-year deals, traded some picks for Tunzel. Samuel, you want to call the Lattimore thing a part of this offseason, happened at the trade deadline, was towards the end of last year. What do we think? Is the criticism fair there, Pop?
Well, I don't know. The one-year deal is interesting because we haven't really – the number of one-year deals is interesting because we haven't really seen that team operate that way, right? It used to be like kind of the exception, and now it's more of the rule. But I think it goes back to what I said a little bit earlier. He's got to field the team. And what he's trying to do is field the team with as many of these guys that are going to be highly motivated, want to be in the group. Let's run it back for a year with guys like Wagner and Ertz and say, look, let's go year to year at this point. If you have another great year, you'll be back. And I think the level of motivation that brings and the fact that you're not locked in. So these people are saying, well, they're not really building for the future because they got all these vets. It's 1-year deal, right? And you still got your number 1 pick and your number 2 pick, which I love. I hope we hang on to him. And maybe he ends up trading back and doing some things. Yeah. You could get 2 more starters with those 2 picks. Right. So I think it's a necessary evil. Is it ideal? Is it perfect to have all these 1-year deals? No. But again, it's year 2. It'll come with time. It's a brilliant strategy for where we are with this team. What other options do you have? If you lock these guys up for 2 or 3 years, it's worse because if you feel like they're mid-free agents or there's question marks around some of these guys, why not have them come in and prove themselves? Right. And if you think of the ads, only Tunzel, Harris, and Kavan, Kinlaw, I probably botched his name.
Javon Kinlaw.
Javon Kinlaw. Combined the last letter, but Dominic has one of his best friends. His name is Kavan. They're the only guys that got multi-year deals, right? So I think it's just I think it's brilliant, honestly. Maybe we're fanboys, but I think it's brilliant because it's necessary to keep this team at that level of competitiveness year to year. And it worked great last year. Same strategy last year. And I love the mix of the guys that we brought back with the new additions, right? We brought a lot of guys back from that core last year.
Yeah, so the bottom line is it increases some volatility, right? Because you don't know if you're swapping out a Jeremy Chin for a Will Harris, is there a drop-off there? Is there an adjustment? Not every single one of these guys is going to be an improvement from what was there last time, right? Now, it's just a fact. Now, you're not going to hit on every single one of them. However, like you said, what it adds, the trade-off you get is optionality. And you have guys and I think you're pairing that optionality with drafting well. You've got a guy in Mike Samersville that you're hoping is going to be here for 10 years. You've got a guy in Jaden Daniels you're hoping is going to be here for 10 years. You've got a guy in Brandon Coleman who I think once they find a spot for him on the offensive line, you're hoping is going to be here for 10 years. You've got a guy in Frankie Louvu who you brought here young on a multi-year deal, will be an extension. You hope that's a lifer as well. You start to build that core around guys. Now, the most controversial choice for that potential type of player here is Kinlaw. There's no way around it. They give Kinlaw a 3-year deal. They bring him in, signaling, hey, we want to get you to be a part. It's basically a 2-year deal if you look at the way the cap hits work and the guarantees and stuff. But you bring the guy in, you say, we want you to be a part of the organization for the next few years. We think we're going to find a home for you. And then you hope once they do find the home for him, they extend them. But again, you have to do it. You can't build a young core without going through the draft. Now, the other side of it is you give away some draft picks. Bottom line is, even in the first round, less than 50% of first-round draft picks get second contracts with the first team that they sign with. So, if you're giving away a fifth round pick for Deebo Samuel. I mean, I can't imagine if we're extrapolating out that first round, I can't imagine it's past the 20% retention rate. So if you give away a 20% chance at a guy that's going to start for you for more than, I mean, look, Chris Rodriguez was a fifth round pick a few years ago. He's on and off the practice squad, and he's a fan favorite, right? But reality of it is, there's a reason he's on and off the practice squad. Um, you give up a guy like that to get a guy like Deebo Samuel, who's a legit starter. Get him in your program. Maybe he likes it here. You can sign him to a 2-3 year extension midway through the year next year, something along those lines. To get a quality starter. Same thing with Laramie Tunzel. You give up what you gave up was a third round pick this year. There's a second round pick coming next year, but you gave up a third round pick this year for that guy, for a quality starter at left tackle to have in your system and a guy you can extend. That's the trade off. So
yeah, you don't love that, the draft picks that we had to give up. But like you said, that's the price of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
It's the price of doing business, and it's not ideal, but I do love the fact that, I said it earlier, that we had the first and the second this year. I do love that.
Yeah, my last point on that, to tie back to where our next question is probably going to go, is you got to play the market. It's the bottom line. You got to play the market. The free agent market was not good this year. It was already a weak class, and then the salary cap bumped an extra $20 million above expected. So a lot of guys that were probably going to have to test free agency ended up staying home because the teams were like, oh, we got an extra $20 million. Let's just keep Chris Godwin. Let's just keep Ronnie Stanley. We don't even have to think about it. You look at the Ravens situation, they had less than $20 million in cap space before that cap jump. And now all of a sudden you get $20 million, you basically get to keep Ronnie Stanley for free. And John Kahn made a great point about this on his podcast. 8 out of the 10 top free agents signed before the window opened this year. So there was not blue chip talent available in free agency. You want to argue Josh Sweat, Milton Williams. I think both of those guys are talented. I think they're A-, B+ players. That's not A+ blue chip talent. And the bottom line is you get into a bidding war with teams like Carolina that don't have much to play for, have a ton of salary cap space, right? Those guys are going to pay these guys a ton of money. And look at what Javon Holland said. Javon Holland got on Twitter, wrote a whole list about, I want to play for a winner, an established head coach, listed off all these things. You're like, okay, cool. He wants to go play for the 2007 New England Patriots. And then he signs with the New York Giants. Why? They paid him the most money. That's just how free agency works. So Peters had numbers for guys. Those guys wanted to go get the most money they could get. He moved on from them, and he pivoted. And he added, I think, key pieces in positions, not just to fill bodies. You had to fill bodies last year. This year, it was, we know what the bodies that are out there are doing. We know what we want to do as a system with the pieces we have. Now we're going to go get specialists at the things that we need to improve.
I agree. Yeah, I think they're targeted. I think they're targeted hits based on, the type of player that they want. So I think if we get into question 3, maybe it'll deep dive in a little bit more on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah. So you want to ask, did they get enough done on defense to contend for the division or NFC titles? And the bottom line is they're already contending for the division and NFC titles. So yes, they're already there. But did they add enough to make you feel like they have a better chance, Pop? How do you feel?
I think the counter argument to that at the end of the day, and look, that's what the scoreboard said, is we got our butts kicked in the NFC Championship game. I think most people would say the gap between us and the Eagles is pretty wide. We're able to kind of, if you go down the roster, we're and even if you think of a Detroit, we're able to kind of close the gap because we have an incredible talent on offense. A Jaden Daniels that can, do a lot of things. And I like to think we've got an elite coaching staff that can coach our guys up and maybe hide some of those cracks. So, no, I don't think we've done enough on defense to have a championship level defense. But I do think we've done, what we could do given the circumstances that you just laid out.
Yeah.
And I think Ken Wallace is a good example, right? He's an ascending player, and he's a player that they know very well, and he's a player that has the measurables to be something special. And what they're betting on is we can coach him up and we can use him in those positions. And he's a third tackle. Yeah, he might flex the edge on this roster. And they feel like that. We've talked about it before that, Kinlaw to John Allen, one-on-one, which would you say is the better player? There's a strong argument. John Allen's the better player. Which one's the better fit for the Commanders? Might be Kinlaw, given the other pieces that are on the line. And I think that's how you got to look at this. But overall, have they done enough? We'll see. I mean, we still have the draft, right? And if you can add a quality starter like Lattimore, who hopefully is healthy and can play well, and I really like Harris. I think he's going to be a really good player. Now you say Harris versus a Chin. It's hard to say.
The same guy.
It's hard to say, right? So, yeah, did they improve the defense at this point? I think they probably think they did. I'll say it that way. But on the outside looking in, it's hard to say that they have. And I would say that's still my biggest area of concern, right?
Well, look, I mean,
we've proven we can put up points, and I think we've only improved the offense, right? But the defense, I think, is still a work in progress.
You didn't add blue chip talent to the defense, but it wasn't available. This is the bottom line.
Yeah, 100%. We agree.
The Bengals want a stupid price for Hendrickson. The Browns never ended up. The guy that only cares about winning ended up signing for $40 million a year with the Cleveland Browns. So they did what they could. And I think if you look across the board, I think they improved at run defense, which was the biggest weakness. They added run stuffers. They've improved at cornerback. I love the Jonathan Jones signing in particular. And they're doing what they can. It's a lot of the same thing that they did last year. But again, we sat here last year. Who's Jeremy Chin? Ends up being a huge impact performer for the defense, right? You didn't know a lot of the names that they brought in were guys that were not necessarily blue chip players, and they've made a history of turning these guys into solid performers so far.
Well, I think I'm going to steal one from you, but it might be a topic we get into deeper in a future pod. But there's a chance for year 2 guys to make a pretty big jump and impact on the defense.
That too.
Right?
Yep.
Johnny Newton, Mikey Sanistrell. Mikey Sanistrell is borderline star. I know there's people taking shots at him. I don't get it. I think he's going to only have another year under his belt of experience. So I think he's a guy it's a riser here. Johnny Newton got a lot of meaningful snaps as a starter. They're really high on him. And then guys that didn't contribute much, like Jordan McGee, Dominic Hampton, and John Batiste as an edge, who they really like. I know he's a late pick, but they really like him as a probably a rotational piece. So if those year 2 guys could take a leap, and then you can move a Louver around like you've talked about in the past, because a McGee can step in and do some of the stuff that he was doing, and we can use Louver more as a rusher. That's another wild card in this whole equation.
Yeah, I mean, John Baptiste performed well. Is just hurt. Same thing with McGee. Had a good camp. He was hurt. If you want to just tell on yourself that you don't know much about football and criticize Mike Samerstill, that's fine. That's your choice. I'm not going to do that. He's a stud. There's no 2 ways around it. He was one of the best rookie corners in the league last year, playing out of position in his 3rd year ever playing the position, and just putting up the types of games that he had, and especially down the stretch. Pretty impressive. And the last thing I'll say is, this is not a team that's built around having a stellar defense. That's just not where the talent is on this roster right now. It doesn't need to be. The formula in the NFL, year in and year out, you have years like last year where a really elite defense like Philly jumps out and gets you there, but most of the time the formula is elite quarterback, top 5 offense, middle of the road defense, average defense that can make stops. That's what you need.
That's a great point. And I think what you'd hope for in the defense too is that it felt like last year. I remember how bad the defense was at the start of the season.
Yeah.
It was awful. But it felt like last year they started figuring out how to use the pieces that they have, to that optimum level and optimize what they have. And the defense started performing much better. So you've got that going into this year. you're not starting with a blank canvas like
Yep,
you were last year. So
exactly.
you hope you're able to kind of play off of that.
Yeah, last year you're starting with, looking at guys that you're tethered to that weren't your choices, and guys like John Allen, Deron Payne, Emmanuel Forbes.
A
I
lot of
mean,
new pieces, I think, was as big as.
for Christ's sake, our starting corners were Emmanuel Forbes and Benjamin St. Juste on the outside to start the year last year. I mean, goodness. Yes, we could contend for an NFC championship with the changes that we've made.
Fair point.
That's my final addition to that right there. Oh my God, why didn't we draft Christian Gonzalez? Anyways, what is your favorite move this offseason this far? This is pretty quick for me. It's a tie between the Debo trade and the Tunzel trade. I'll lean Tunzel trade because of just the fact that he's just still an elite blue chip player. There's maybe a little more question marks around Debo. But the Tunzel trade's my favorite move. What's your favorite, Pop?
It's got to be Tunsil trade. I
Yeah.
was. You heard me before free agency started and the draft and all that. I said we got to go out and get a left tackle. We got to go out and get a left tackle. That was my number one need or want or desire for this team, and they went out and did it. So it's got to be Laramie Tunsil, plain and
Yep.
simple.
Yeah, it's that easy. I love the Debo trade though for just a fifth round pick. I think that's going to look
I hope so.
pretty
I've got
good
more
about
question
midway through the
marks
season.
about him. Well, to me, I'm excited about him. I'm excited about the potential there. I worry a little bit about how it's all going to play out, just injury wise and where he is, at year 29. I worry a little bit about that. But Tunsil, I think, is the only thing that could stop him is some sort of major injury. He's just a great player. And
Yeah.
at 31, he's got plenty left in the tank.
Yep. Yeah. Tackles
Yeah.
usually play for quite some more time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that brings us to number 5, Pop. What are your bold predictions for another roster move?
I know you contradicted this last week. I think we're going to see a shakeup at running back. It might be because you feel like you got the running backs locked in, right? You brought all the guys back from last year. But I don't know that they're satisfied because if you think of the two things now, you get a little bit of help from Debo Samuel in that hybrid mode. No doubt about it. But if you think of the number one things that can keep the pressure off Jaden Daniels, offensive line, specifically left tackle, you've drafted that, and dynamic playmaking ability out of the backfield, which we you could argue we don't really have at this point. So we might see a trade, might see a draft pick that leads to a shakeup, but I think that running back room is going to get shooken up. That's my bold prediction.
I like it. It's a good one. I don't want to get too into we'll talk more about my feelings on the running back position when we get into our draft episodes, because it's more in depth than I think we have time for 33 minutes into this pod here. But oh man, my bold prediction for another roster move is I think we probably trade out of 29 and we take an edge first. That's my bold prediction. It's not bold. I think this roster's
the best you got.
I think the roster's done, man. I don't think there's a lot more moves to be made. It's hard to be bold. I mean, you want to be fun and say that we trade back from 29 and then trade a second round pick for Trey Hendrickson? Sure. It's not going to happen, but it's a fun, bold prediction.
I don't think they want to deplete the draft any more than it already has been, and I don't want them to either.
Yeah. So that's it for our segment here, guys. I think it's been a lot of fun. A little disappointing note to end on there. But lots of good stuff going forward here.
Yeah, that was good. That was fun. I want to say something. Can I say something real quick? Because I know before we wrap. People might think we stole. So the 5 questions is obviously in honor of Jaden Daniels, number 5. We were first with that. So I know other people are doing it. Go back and check the tape. We were one of the first that did it before I saw anyone else doing it. So I don't mind. We're a little small podcast. You know what he's saying? Mom and pop shop, dom and pop shop. There's a good one.
There it is.
But I don't want to hear it. We copied it off anyway, just for the record.
No, that definitely is not true. We've been doing this for
I doubt others copied us two brilliant minds thinking alike.
It's not that hard to put two and two together.
It's
but
cool, but we didn't copy it. I just want it doesn't stop us from copying other stuff.
Oh, we will, and we have.
We'll shamelessly do that.
We will, and we have. But this one,
anyway,
this
I had to
one's
get
different.
that off my chest.
Anyways, glad Pop cleared the air on that one. I know that was a big controversy. So, what do you say we wrap this thing up, man? It's been a lot of fun. I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
We'll see you all next week, and hail to the Commanders.
Hail.